with the highest taxes on business in the world, where we have counterproductive energy policies, where we have these regulations, expansion of government, this dangerous debt. Other countries are going pedal to the metal. They really are. And so what we now have is a government that is bumbling in the pits, while these other countries are going pedal to the metal and starting to lap us. So we don't have that luxury of the rest of the world's going pedaling along at 10, 15 miles per hour. They're going faster. And so that's why it's really important we understand the competitiveness of the world. And then you look at on energy policies in itself. In sports, every team, if a team wins a game, the fans are all saying we're number one. You know, and everyone loves their high school team and their pro team and their college team. Well, when it comes to energy, America really is number one in the world, thanks primarily to our plentiful coal as well as oil and gas resources. Russia's number 2, Saudi Arabia is number 3. You would never know that, because the prevailing views in Washington are that these resources are a curse rather than a blessing. Any other country would say, look how fortunate and blessed we are to have these resources. Our government takes the exact opposite approach. I was speaking at St. Paul's College in Southside, Virginia, and some football players and a coach there. I said, hey coach, y'all ever punt on first down? And he said, no, you never punt on first down. And I said, perfect, that's a chapter title in one of the book that's coming out. We have been punting on energy policy in this country on first down since the 1970s, when OPEC started manipulating production and their embargo. Now, my friends, we need to be using common sense, practical conservation, battery technologies, innovative ideas. All of those make a great deal of sense. We also ought to be using our abundant coal resources creatively and cleanly if we want to have affordable electricity, which is the lifeblood of our economy. We can make coal into a coal synfuel. Every jet flying out of Johannesburg's airport in South Africa is on a coal synfuel mixture, or coal synfuel, to propel it. We ought to be using advanced nuclear. I know this is awful to say this, but we can learn from the French. The French get 80% of their electricity from nuclear. We won't get 80%, but we get about 20 from nuclear, 50 from coal, and 7% from hydro, and about 20 from natural gas, and 3% from waste energy, solar, wind, and so forth. At any rate, the French reprocess their spent fuel. It's a much safer, less dangerous, more efficient way of doing it, so we don't have high-level radioactive waste sitting at every one of our reactors. And the bottom line is I know darn well if the French can do it, so can Americans. And so we ought to have that advanced nuclear. And the only reason we don't, Jimmy Carter-era policies worrying about nuclear proliferation. Absurd. And we also ought to allow states like Virginia and others, if they so desire, to explore for oil and gas off their coast. Now, what's happening, this catastrophe in the Gulf of Mexico is a catastrophe. It's a disaster. BP needs to be held accountable for their negligence and levels of neglect. And what we need to do is learn from this and determine what were the reasons, human error, mechanical reasons, determine what are the best technologies that are available. We can learn from maybe the Canadians and the way that they explore off their coast and the Grand Banks, which are great fishing areas. Maybe learn from the Norwegians. But the point is, we can't have what's going on in Washington now in a moratorium, shutting down all production, new production on the Gulf Coast, and throwing well over potentially 100,000 families out of work, 100,000 people out of work. Because if you say we're going to shut down production in our country, well, guess what? The Castro brothers are drilling 50 miles off the coast of Florida, along with Russia and other countries. This same government that is wanting this moratorium on U.S. offshore production last year lent $2 billion of your money, of Americans' money, to the state-owned oil company of Brazil for them to drill for oil and gas off their coast. That's how convoluted and cockeyed our policies are. So the point is that we ought to be using our resources. There's no single silver bullet. We need silver buckshot, all of it. Coal, natural gas, oil, common sense conservation, batteries, nuclear, and all the rest. Now, an example, though, of what's wrong with Washington was a vote just a few weeks ago on these EPA regulations of CO2. Now, the regulation of CO2, which is the reason for the so-called cap and trade scheme, which would only be a transfer of wealth out of our country to Europe, whether it's that or EPA's regulations of CO2, is because that is going to affect the temperature of the Earth. Now, CO2, 96% of the carbon dioxide, which is an odorless, colorless substance, 96% of it in our atmosphere occurs naturally. Most of it comes from evaporation, mostly from the ocean. Only 4% is man-made. Now, they say that if we have all these draconian regulations, cap and trade, or EPA, what they're proposing, that this will somehow, and of course if the whole world did this, that we will alter the temperature of the Earth 50 years from now by a fraction of 1 degree cooler. My goodness, they can't predict the weather 1 month from now accurately, much less 50 years from now. And it's humorous to think we're going to affect Mother Nature. We're in a solar system. It gets hotter here, guess what? It gets warmer on Mars, too. We're in a solar system. Now, here's what's so upsetting, is that the Supreme Court of the United States, unelected judges appointed for life in a narrow decision, it was Massachusetts versus EPA, gave to the bureaucracy of EPA the right to regulate so-called greenhouse gases if they said there was an endangerment to climate. The EPA does not have this legal legislative authority. The Clean Air Act never gave them the right or the responsibility or authority to regulate CO2. So there were some in the Senate just a few weeks ago who said, no, you can have what are called resolutions of disapproval, which is good. We, the people, our representatives, can say, no, we disapprove this. And so what happened? Unfortunately, a narrow majority, 53 to 47, said, no, we're going to abdicate, we're going to cede our legislative authority and give the authority to these unelected bureaucrats to put in these burdens of regulations that are really going to hurt small businesses. Heck, anybody who uses electricity would have skyrocketing electricity costs, higher fuel costs, higher food costs, anything you buy in a store.